Welcome to the Innova podcast, where our job is to help you build visibility, professional credibility, and connection with your ideal client by putting the human at the center of innovative marketing, so you can build and strengthen an engaging, enduring relationship with your ideal clients. I'm Jürgen Strauss from Innovators, and I'm honored that you're here with me. If you haven't joined our wonderful marketing transformation community yet, go to innovabiz.co and collect your free gift as well. Do subscribe to the show and also leave a review because it helps others find us. Let's get into today's masterclass on this InnovaBuzz podcast.
Improvise the scene that you are in, not the one you want to be in. Which means ever since we shut down as a world and now we're coming back, every day there's been something new. And an improviser doesn't get attached to yesterday when today's changing. An improviser is going, okay, that's not working right now, or that's not true right now. What's true today, and how can I have a positive effect on what I'm trying to do?
Welcome back. I hope you've had an awesome week so far. If you haven't yet listened to my recent conversations with copywriter and content creator Christina Torres and with sales and profit coach Fabian Patel, then do check them out, but only after you've listened to today's conversation. I'm really excited to have on the InnovaBuzz podcast as my guest today, Peter Margaritis, author of Taking the Numb Out of Numbers and Improv is No Joke. During his time as a corporate CPA, certified practicing accountant, Peter took improv classes, and today he shows us how to use the tools he learned in improv, like listening, flexibility, and trust, to change how a team interacts with each other and their clients. As a result, your team will learn new methods to improve their communication and build stronger relationships with your clients, with your customers, with your stakeholders and associates. In our conversation today, Peter talked to me about listening fully and being fully present. We talked about making your presentation about your audience and hearing things in their voice. And he explained how to improvise the scene you are in, not the one you'd like to be in. Without further ado then, let's fly into the hive and get the buzz from Peter Margaritis. Hi, I'm your host Jürgen Strauss from Innovabiz, and I'm really excited to welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast today from Westerville, Ohio in the USA, Peter Margaritis, who is self-described as the accidental accountant. He's a certified speaking professional. He's an improv virtuoso, and he's also author of the books Taking the Numb Out of Numbers and Improv is No Joke. Welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, Peter. It's a great privilege to have you as my guest.
Oh, thank you, Jürgen. I've been looking forward to our conversation for a while.
Great. And Dr. Gleb Tsipursky, who was our guest on episode 271 of the InnovaBuzz podcast, suggested that we speak with you, and he introduced us. So a big shout out to Gleb.
Absolutely. Gleb's a great guy.
Yeah, we had a wonderful conversation with him too about never trusting your gut. Now, Peter, you also host the Change Your Mindset podcast, which began life as the Improv is No Joke podcast, which is what I'm kind of looking forward to exploring with you today, the idea of applying improv in your business and why it's not a joke. But before we start talking about all of those things, improv and how it applies to business and your podcasts, tell us a little bit about your background. Give us a whistle-stop tour of how you ended up where you are today.
So I'll start off. I'm Greek American. From the age of 12, I was in the restaurant business. I started in restaurant business at 12, customer service, all the way through college. Found myself after college working in a bank, repo and lending out money, commercial lending. And then I found myself working on a master's degree in accountancy. I think I lost the bet. I don't remember how that all really true came about. I think it was my father had a big to do of it. And I earned a master's degree in accountancy from Case Western Reserve and went to work for Price Waterhouse. And what I observed almost immediately, there's no customer service.
Mm.
The gregariousness of a Greek American family and me working in the customer service business was just the opposite when I walked into public accounting. And I didn't understand it, and which really was the prefaces of everything else that followed. I did a few years, I survived a few years at Price Waterhouse, and then I went to work for Victoria's Secret Catalog. Not as a model, but I appreciate you thinking about that. So early in the morning for you. Um, and I did about 5 years there, and then I found myself in academia teaching. Now, I am a CPA, licensed CPA, non-practicing, and those who teach don't do it well. I'm the poster child for
Mm.
that. I love the profession. I understand the profession, big picture, small picture. I can teach it. I just don't do it well. And but during this process, I started developing all types of programming, communication types of programming around the concept of improv or improvisation. And CPAs would go, "You're not going to make me funny." I said, "This is not about being funny. I probably can't make you funny anyhow. But this is a communication tool that you can better grow your business with." Well, in the wow 90s, yeah, 90s and early 2000s, that's a very hard sell.
Mm.
But over time, and about the time of the Great Recession, they started getting the idea that there has to be something different. We can't do the same things we've been doing for years. So since then, I've had my own business since 2010 full time. I've been doing this for about 20 years. I have not worked a day since I went full time. Now, if you ask my wife, you get a completely different story from that. But I love what I do. Even the whole COVID-19 is not really knocked my business off the rails. It's given me time to create the next iteration of my business.
Mm.
That's the Whistle Stop Tour.
Yeah, great. And yeah, I like the I like the whole idea of improv as a way to reinvent your business too. And I think, there's perhaps a lesson in that as to, because one of the things I thought, well, an obvious question is, how does improv apply to business? But I think what you've said there around COVID-19 and reinventing, a lot of businesses have had to reinvent themselves because all of a sudden they can't do a lot of the things that are vital to running their business. And so I think that's a great skill to have.
It really starts, and improv really starts with these two words, yes and everything follows that. Agree and add on to it. Agree and add on. Now, we don't say yes to everything. There are certain situations where no is proper, and especially if somebody's trying to push me across my ethical boundaries, or it's not the right time. But if you can listen to somebody and listen to the thoughts and opinions, one, you're kind of, taking a liking to them. They feel, what's the word I'm looking for? It'll come to me in empowered, in essence. When somebody's listening to what you're saying, it gives them a sense of not entitlement, but it's a good feeling. Wow, Jurgen's listened to what I'm saying. It's most people leave their job because lack of appreciation, and just by listening, you're showing your appreciation. But as it comes to innovation, is you get into these meetings and these boardrooms, and all of a sudden you're trying to create ideas and scrutinize the ideas at the same time, which it doesn't work. Because if you want to generate ideas, you've got to push your judgment aside.
Hmm.
And crazy ideas is what we're looking for. Not that we're going to execute on them, but the crazier the ideas, I've got bandwidth to create. And in the corporate American world right now, as relates to trying to innovate our businesses, most businesses don't operate like this. It's like, oh, we can't do that's a terrible idea. We can't do that. How do you expect us to do that? No, push that aside. There's a point and place for convergent thinking versus divergent thinking. And divergent thinking is the key to yes and really running your business.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. The yes and is also, I mean, it's a replacement for but. And if you say, hey, that's a great idea, but, and you've immediately, by using that word, dismissed it. So it's not really a great idea. So unconsciously, the person listening to you says, well, you don't like the idea. And so it shuts it down rather than opens up possibilities for exploring that particular idea further.
Actually, yeah, that, yes. And when people say no, because that's the same thing. Ideas just the conversation just stops to a halt. But if you can just provide that, yes, I'm listening to you. I want to hear more and tell me more.
Mm.
Um, Amazing things can happen. I mean, it's really a superpower. I could have talked myself out of this business thousands of times. That negative self-talk, but
Mm.
I've learned to put duct tape over my mother's voice in my head and go, what's the worst thing I could do? I could fail, but that's not terrible. You learn when you fail. You learn when you make mistakes, and you learn from those mistakes how to do it differently. Where a lot of organizations has become punitive if you make a mistake. So where are you going to get your ideas from? Nobody's going to give them to you because of that fear factor.
Yeah.
You in an open culture.
Mm. All right. So talk us a little bit through then. I mean, I know you spent quite a bit of time learning improv, and I think you were a stand-up comedian during your early student years as well. So you kind of practiced this um, in different forms going through. Tell us a little bit about the lessons you've learnt and how they apply to business.
Well, I was doing stand-up comedy. There's a difference between stand-up comedy and improv. Stand-up comedy is scripted. There's a pattern. Improv. There's no script.
Hmm.
Now, how it applies in business is when you can create an atmosphere that has a bottom line or a foundation of respect, trust, and support. I don't have to like you, but if we're working together, at least I should have some respect for you and vice versa.
Hmm.
And it all falls apart because there's a situation where neither side has a respect for each other. And we call that here the United States Congress. Because neither side has respect. It's either my way or the highway, and nothing's getting done. So as well as you have to be trustworthy, and I want to be trustworthy to you. And this all goes also when you're on stage with your other actors, your teammates. I gotta have respect for them. They've got my back, I got their back, and I'm there to support them as well as there to support me. And as a leader of a team, I want to basically I hire you with a thought that you're going to take my job and I'm going to move up and I'm going to give you every resource necessary. So that's the foundation of, in my view, of the principles of improvisation.
Hmm.
But here's the superpowers: listening and being focused, being present. Now, in improv, we call it listening to understand versus listening to respond. We live in a listen to respond environment where there's too many distractions when somebody's talking, but whether they're internal distractions or external distractions. We tend to interrupt people. And really, when we interrupt someone, it's not what we meant, but we're telling them that we have no respect for what they're saying. And that just keeps defeating the whole appreciation side of it. But if you can listen to understand and take your agenda, your ego, and just park it over here and just leave it over there, suspend that judgment for now, and listening to everything this person is trying to say and empathizing, because empathy, I talk to folks, I go, do you remember the first time you walked into your very first job or a new
Hmm.
location? How did you feel? How long
Yeah.
did it take you to get up to speed? Remember that, because most people forget about that when new people come on board. And so just suspend that judgment and have the conversation and learn what the other person is thinking about, all the while being present, not being distracted by, I've told folks that if you're leaving a meeting and on your way to another meeting and one of your associates stop you and say, hey, do you have a moment? The correct answer is, uh, not right now. Let's find some time when there's no distractions where you and I can have this conversation. Because if you take that conversation on right now, you're not hearing anything. Because one, you're not present. I'm thinking about the meeting I just left and the meeting I'm going to, and I'm not hearing what this person says. And when you can put all of these pieces in place, you can adapt to any business situation that's in front of you.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of great advice in that. I love the whole idea of empathy. I mean, empathy, I talk a lot about empathy in marketing and understanding your ideal client. And there's a lot of what you've said in that message that is congruent with that. And it's really about being present, listening, having empathy, putting aside the ego. Like the ego gets in the way. I mean, ego is important, but it often gets in the way, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. A little bit too much.
Mm. All right. So now I know you also do lots of presentations. You're an accredited speaker, which is quite rare, I believe. So well done on that. Now, one of the things that you talk about in some of your presentations is how to use humor, which is something that I find quite challenging. And I'm curious to hear your take on that.
Um, so there's a difference between jokes and humor.
Yeah.
Jokes can be offensive, like a priest, a rabbi, and Bill Clinton walk into a bar.
Hmm.
Now you've offended a whole lot of people. Okay.
Yeah.
Humor is so when I really started teaching at the university level, I read a quote by a gentleman by the name of Mel Hurlitzer, who was an Ohio University professor in the School of Journalism. And he said, it's not what's caught at the university, it's what's, excuse me, let me, it's not, he said, it's not what's taught at the university, it's what's caught. And if I can make my students laugh, then I can spoon in the knowledge. So humor is the way that you communicate with the audience. And those who can improvise can be very funny in a classroom situation because we're always searching around the environment. We're always making these associations, these, I'm thinking quick on my feet. It's also by not taking yourself overly serious. And I try to make them laugh through videos, through stories, through almost anything I can do to bring in laughter because they will pay attention and not be in the middle of a data dump where a lot of these technical presentations, accounting, engineering, architecture, it's just a data dump and it's mind numbing. And people are sitting there going, well, okay, I got my credit, my CEUs. I really don't remember anything, but we're asked to attend to take that knowledge and to apply it. And there's a breakdown in that system if we're just boring them to death. So I try to use humor as much as I can.
Hmm. And you talked about improv there in the sense of taking things that are happening in that environment and perhaps turning those into a
Mhm.
story or adapting those to bring into the lesson that you're teaching. I think that comes back to the whole idea of being quick on your feet and adapting to the situation. So how would you apply that in say a marketing sense? So
That's
you
true.
talked a little bit about leadership, but I thought I'd explore a little bit how would you put that into a marketing situation?
Well, I'm guilty of this because I was never really trained in marketing, and same thing even from a presentation perspective. It's not about me. It's
Mm,
about my audience. When I'm giving a presentation, I have my audience, and it's my responsibility to engage them so they can take this information and apply it. It's my responsibility to be more focused on them than it is myself. Now, in a marketing standpoint, we have to know our target audience and we have to understand our target audience. But a lot of times I think we get complacent and not really dwelling into that market. I'm in the process of reinventing my business, and I've been holding these marketing research phone calls, asking for 15 minutes of people's time. I'm getting like an hour of their time, and
mm,
just asking a series of questions, trying to, even though I've been in the profession for a long time, I want to hear it in their words, not the words that I think they're saying. So I've been gathering up these phone calls. I'm in the process of going through and sifting through and looking for key words that they've been using, key phrases that they've been using, those pain points and things, so I can build my marketing plan around that. Because it's not about me, it's about my audience. It's about my customer, my client. And the more that we can remember that, really helps in a marketing sense. And like I said, I used to be that guy because it was all about me.
Hmm.
And I was wondering why I wasn't connecting with my target audience.
Yeah, it's the ego thing again, isn't it?
It is. It is. And I've been called out a few times over the years, and I don't take offense to it. I go, you're right. We all have one. Some are larger than others. And if we can just find a place to put the ego for a while, and think about the others, not about ourselves, it goes a long way in growing our businesses.
So that's the empathy thing again, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. There's so much fantastic advice in what you've just said, talking to the customers and then using their language so that you're actually speaking to them in a language that they understand. And I'm certainly guilty of this too. I tend to, particularly I was having a conversation the other day and we're talking about writing versus recording your own voice. And I said, well, if I write, I know that if I just sit down and write on a piece of paper an article or a blog or something, I know that it comes across quite formal, and that's not the way I speak. So it's much better to record that and speak, because then it's my voice. But to then use language that resonates with your ideal audience, as you said, that's a talent that I think is underutilized. So listening to what they say. Another one that I heard recently, I thought that's actually really good, is read reviews that people write about things in your area, because that often highlights, particularly if they're bad reviews, because people will vent about what's annoying them and what's their pain right now in their language.
Exactly. So I did a workshop for a construction finance management association a couple years ago, and they're accountants, but they do a different kind of accounting called this construction accounting. I was not an expert in that, and the association put me with one of their instructional designers, and I had to learn their language. So when I did the half day presentation, now was I fluent? No, but I knew enough to be dangerous. And they also, my audience really liked the fact that I was speaking in their language, because when you give a presentation, that's also marketing, right? A form of
Yep.
marketing. So anytime that, and I did this later on with a group of civil engineers, CFO of civil engineering firms. This guy who contracted me to help, I said, I need to learn your language. He said, absolutely, whatever. And I think by the end of it, he was tired of me because I kept asking more questions and said, I really need to, not be fluent per se, but be credible in my talk, that I'm hitting their ears, not, oh, he's just here talking about baseline accounting or baseline. He doesn't even really know what we do.
Yeah, and I imagine, I don't know much about accounting other than what I have to know to run my own finances, but I imagine that it's quite different in terminology and some of the nuanced practices that are standard in different industries.
It is, and both of those cases, I was working with these groups so they could take the numb out of numbers and start to deliver more engaging presentations. So when I'm talking about their financial statements, I had to at least have some knowledge of how they look, the language that they use, certain calculations, the more important ones, that in order to make those connections with those audience members.
All right, so let's talk. I mean, as we're recording this, we are in the middle of the COVID pandemic. Hopefully, we're over the top of the mountain and coming back down, but who knows? Let's talk a little bit about adjusting to unanticipated situations like that nobody can predict up front until it happens. What's your advice, and what can we learn from improv?
Well, an improviser is extremely adaptable. Okay. We adapt to almost any situation. So in late February, I started getting word about the pandemic, and it was starting to get a little more chatter in the U.S. And a buddy of mine had sent me a few articles, and I went, "Oh, okay," which set in the back of my head. And as we got closer and closer to this happening, I didn't freak out. I immediately went to, okay, I've been wanting to redesign my business. Now's the time. Now,
Mm.
there's been some better days than others. And every now and then, you kind of get a little, because of all the noise and everything. But for the most part, uh, one of my favorite lines in improv is improvise the scene that you are in, not the one you want to be in, which
Mm.
means every day, ever since we shut down as a world and now we're coming back, every day there's been something new. And an improviser doesn't get attached to yesterday when today's changing. An improviser is going, okay, that's not working right now, or that's not true right now. What's true today, and how can I have a positive effect on what I'm trying to do? And I try to do this every single day. And I've been doing this every single day for once I first realized that improv is more about being funny. It's really a way of life. It's a leadership tool. So well, I took the Strengths Finder, the Gallup Strengths Finder test, and my
Mm.
number one strength was adaptability.
Mm.
Number three was empathy. And
Yeah.
there were two others within the improv world, but I can almost adapt to almost anything. I can roll with the changes, as REO Speedwagon once sang about.
Mm. Yeah, and I think people that are complaining a lot about how it's impacting their business and not really doing much about it are not doing that adapting. And I sometimes wonder how they've survived this long because, yeah, there's some amazing things happening where people are adapting. And, it's just a lesson in that you can improvise the situation and come up with new ideas.
I've been working harder now since my business was 80% speaking and 20% some residual stuff I had out there. So most of my business came to a complete stop, at least through June, now going into July. But I've been busier now than I was prior to them because now I realize I've got the time.
Hmm.
So I got to get in that right mindset. This is a gift for my business to sit and try to recreate what it's going to look like when we come out of this. So should we get back into this again, I will be better insulated. I'll be more diversified in my product offering. Um, and so far so good. I mean, I'm starting to collect all my data and starting to put the Legos together and building this new business. And it's been exciting. It's been frustrating. I've had some great people around me that we've been able to bounce stuff off of each other and get ideas. From a business perspective, it's been an interesting piece. And I know a lot of my brethren who are wanting it to be like it was yesterday, when I
Hmm.
don't think yesterday is going to be here again. When we come at the other end, it's going to look completely different. And I don't want to be J.C. Penney, Sears of the new world because they were slow to market. And, oh, Amazon, do you know those guys just sell books?
Yeah.
It's a fad. The internet and all the World Wide Web, it's a fad. Uh, yeah, no, it's not a fad. And we see what's happened to major retailers, and Macy's is included into that. Versus, keep your eyes open.
Hmm.
What could put you out of business? Okay, a pandemic. Okay,
Hmm.
so you may not have been ready for the first one, but I'm not going to let it. If there's another one behind it, or we go through some serious spikes, I'm not going to. Hopefully, I've insulated it a little bit better.
Hmm. Yeah. Yes, keeping your eye out for trends. I mean, there's lessons that I've had in my career. I mean, I started my career as a chemist in the photographic industry,
Really?
and yeah, and yeah, the listener will know this story if they're a regular listener. I started in the photographic industry. I've been a hobby photographer ever since I can remember, as a very young child. So, to me, that was kind of the dream job. Initially, combining my formal training with my kind of number one hobby, and yet within a very short space of time, there was this thing called digital photography that came onto the consumer scene, and I lived through the response there. It was pretty much like the big retailers thought about Amazon in the early days.
Right.
And we all know what happened.
That's true. And we can predict the future a little bit.
Hmm.
A case in point, we all have these things called the smartphone.
Hmm.
I don't think I'm going to go, my next one I'm going to buy is going to be a dumber phone.
Yeah.
So we know that technology is going to continue to evolve. So let's predict that technology. What could be, right now we're having artificial intelligence really have an impact in the accounting profession. So if that's the case, then what do we do now to ensure ourselves of a career or a business as we move forward if we don't have to count the beans? Demographics, we can watch the demographics. We see these generations, large and small. We should have known that the millennials are going to take over the world because there's such a large population of them, like the baby boomers and the poor Gen X's are kind of stuck in the middle, but they were such a smaller group. And you see this from, succession planning and so many things as an employment where we had the ability to predict it because these are pretty hard trends.
Yeah. And again, it comes back to what you were saying earlier about keeping your eyes open, keeping listening to what's going on, talking to people.
And listening to the experts.
Yes, well, there's a lot of that hasn't been happening in some circles.
That's correct. I'm not an expert. I'm an expert in some things and not an expert in others. And I will listen to the experts before I listen to those who are non-experts, but think they're experts.
All right. Your podcast, Changing Your Mindset, and you changed the title from Improv is No Joke a little while back. So what's the podcast? Tell us what's the podcast about and what are some of the lessons you've learnt through the podcasting?
Well, I knew I was going to be successful because when I was a child, my mother told me I had a face for radio. So when I heard about podcasting, I knew that this was for me. It was back in 2016. My first book had been out, Improv is No Joke, and I wanted to start a podcast. Couldn't really figure out a title. So I titled it Improv is No Joke, but the real purpose of the podcast is how to make people better communicators, how to make financial experts better communicators, using the power of improv. So that was the essence of it. But I think, financial professional looking about communication, improv, I'm not here to be funny and just go on to the next. I did 100 episodes once every week, and then we went through a rebranding of Change Your Mindset, which it really is. I'm trying to get people to change their mindset from old ways into new thinking, into new ways of communicating. And there's more to communication than just email or text messaging. There's this thing called our voices and how, even from a writing perspective. And I interview a wide variety of folks, and I'll be honest with you, Jürgen. I don't know about you. You've 250, 60 episodes. I've got about 155. I'm doing it about every other week, and I've tried to divorce this thing 3 times. And it's a real labor of love. I mean, it keeps bringing me back in, but I'm also able to. And part of this process is now I'm going to be recreating the podcast a little bit here in this next month of June, doing a few things differently. I'm always tinkering with it, and how to get that message across. So when the shutdown began, I started interviewing folks about how to deal with the realities of COVID-19, and the first one was my improv coach, Jay Sukhov, out of LA, and it's improvise the scene that you're in, not the one you want it to be. And just be able to adapt, listen, focus, and try to stay present, because a lot of times during this, we're thinking about 2, 3, 4 months ahead, and we can't see that far. And then we get caught up in that cyclone, that black hole, and we spin out of control versus taking care of what we have today, focusing on the things that we can control, and not paying attention to those things we have no control over. And that 2 months of it, I got a lot of great comments back from folks, and trying to help people view things just a little bit differently. And I'm hooked on it. I don't think I the podcast, I don't see it really it's going to shut me down before I shut it down. It's going to be like Hal in Space Odyssey 2000.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Yes, I certainly, I mean, I've really enjoyed it and continue to enjoy it. And you're right, there's times where I find it a little bit draining. Some weeks I have 5, 6 interviews,
Wow.
or I don't call them interviews. I like to call them conversations.
I don't-
Um, but with I mean, as you know, there's a bit of preparation to be done, and then there's some work to be done at the other end to produce it. Although I have a wonderful producer, and yeah, 5 or 6 interviews a week, I find that quite draining. So what we've implemented now is I have a week off every 4 weeks from doing those conversations, and that kind of refreshes me a little bit again. But it's such a wonderful opportunity to meet people and speak to people from diverse backgrounds, like you say, and also to learn from them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love your podcast, and I love the style that you're using because we use the same style. You did your homework. You didn't send me a list of 20 questions for me to fill out and send back, and
Mm,
kind of, okay, let's look at the next and kind of go through this robotic thing because that's not a conversation. It's these kind of questions that we're going through, and just kind of, and we're like two guys in a bar having a beer.
yeah, that's the way I like to run it, yeah.
Yeah, and I run mine the same way, but to your point, it is exhausting because 'cause you're doing all the prep work in front, make sure you're on the understanding. Now I have a great producer as well that because I don't have that skill set to do the back end stuff, but
Mm,
it can be draining, especially if you're
mm,
doing 5 or 6 a week.
yeah. Yes, I think I've got a week of 5 next week, but that's fine. Yes, and we have a long queue in place as well. So for the listener, we've got, I think this one's going to be episode 308.
Wow,
So we've published 200 and I think we might be at 285 as we're recording this.
wow.
Hmm, yeah,
That's impressive. I mean, that's well, actually, the best advice someone gave me who already had a podcast, commitment 18 months, reassess at that point. You've got to
yeah.
go 18 months commitment. If you're going to do it every week, do it every week. If it's going to be out on a Monday, it's got to be out on a Monday. Get 2 months in the can and then reassess it. And there's only been one time in doing this since 2016 that a guest had to back out the last moment. I had nobody. So I pulled an episode from the Improv No Joke and put it in the change your mindset. But those have been very few and very far between.
Hmm, yeah, yeah. Well, we've had in the early days, I've had situations where I've had to do a solo episode, and then the at short notice because a guest pulled out, and then of course the quality suffers if you do that because it's not as well prepared or
Right.
rehearsed. So we have the luxury now of having plenty in the can. So if a guest has to reschedule, it's not an issue at all.
So let me ask you a question. What's the best thing about your podcast? What have you learned from your podcast?
Oh, I've learnt lots from the podcast. um, I The best thing about it, ooh, that's a tough question. There's so many good things about it. I I love having the conversations. I love meeting people. We talked earlier about technology, the ability to actually reach out to somebody anywhere in the world, as long as they have internet connection and a reasonable quality microphone, and have a conversation like this, and then learn from their experience, and then to share that with other people. I guess they're the things that I really love about it.
Same way. I'm the same way. I love meeting people. I love learning from other people. I like laughing with other people. But the thing that shocked me the most was when I started getting my stats that people in other countries were listening to me.
Mm,
And as it's grown, I went. I think the last I saw, I've been, I don't know, 70 countries.
yeah.
That's crazy.
It is, yeah, yeah, and if I look at my stats and I see some unusual countries that I never would have expected, why would people listen there? I think I've got what was one I saw the other day? Oh, I can't remember now. It might have been the Ukraine or Romania or something like that. And I thought, they're taking the time to listen to this in English, where clearly that's not their first language, and in a country where you wouldn't necessarily expect them to be learning English as a second language.
Right. Yeah. And I think the one that shocked me the most was few people in Russia were listening to mine, and I'm thinking, oh, cool, Putin's listening to me, man. Yeah, there goes my website's going to get hacked.
Yeah. They're monitoring you. You're a danger to the state security.
Exactly. I don't know. I don't know about you, but I said I've had this wanted to divorce because it does take a lot of work. But anymore, somebody said, people have been listening to you for 4 years. You just can't let them go. Now they can let you go, and if your numbers start dropping, like the stock market, and it gets to the point that it's at the bottom, then that's when you leave. But now when people are still subscribing and still listening, and it says you just got to keep it going as part of your brand. And I went, oh man, that person's right. I got to quit. I got to cut them out of my friendship circle.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been fantastic, Peter. I think it's a good time though to move on to the buzz, which is our innovation round, and it's designed to help our audience, who are primarily innovators and leaders in their field, with some tips from your experience. So I've got 5 questions, and hopefully you'll give us some really insightful answers that will inspire the listener to go and do something awesome as a result today. So what's the number one you think anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
Follow your fear. Lean into it. You're walking into the unknown. Just follow it, and at the other side, it's going to be amazing what you find. I think a lot of people are afraid of innovation. And when I was talking about crazy ideas, the crazier the idea, the better, because then you've got bandwidth to play. We're not going to do something, but in an improv, we always say, bad ideas are bridges to good ideas. No ideas lead to nothing.
Yeah, I love that. Bridges to good ideas.
Yeah. And another thing I think of as it comes to innovation is the collective knowledge outside of your office far exceeds the collective knowledge inside of your office. In other words, if you have a problem to solve in your business, ask the people outside of your office what would be their idea and how to solve it. I've always said that if I had my own firm or my own business and I was working on something, and I would send an email out on a Friday, went, okay, folks, here's the problem. Monday morning when you come into work, I want you to put a Post-it note on my whiteboard in my office to give me your idea on how to solve this problem. Because if I got 50 people in the office, I've got 50 ideas. One of those ideas might be the one that solves a problem, or one of those ideas might lead us to solving that problem. But if my ego gets in the way and I'm the solver of all problems, we call that bringing a cathedral versus everybody bring me a brick and let's build the solution.
Yeah, bringing a cathedral. Love those. All right. So, get outside input into what you're doing to bring in new ideas. Yeah, great. Okay. Now, what's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
I've learned how to bounce them off of my friends. I've learned how to really come up and bring myself into crazy ideas. I'm not a writer. I'm not a trained writer. But I knew I had something in my head, and I found a publisher who could get it out of me. I didn't say, no, this is crazy. Okay, let's try it. Let's do it. But I found out when you write one, then here comes another one a few years later. And one of the things that COVID-19 has allowed me to do is start working on number 3.
Yeah.
So it's just, keep exploring, find out what do you what do you want your business to look like? What problems are you dealing with right now? I mean, I can only imagine, business today going, okay, do I need these 18 floors for my associates now when we've been pretty effective and productive working remotely?
Mm.
Uh, do I need only 3 floors? And then some businesses are going who need the people. I've got 3. Do I need 10?
Mm.
This is a really interesting time. There's been a ton of innovation that's going on. And when we get to the end of it, we're going to look very different.
Yeah, yeah. And that raises, I mean, bouncing ideas off your friends, the answer, I just reflect back on that. I think that's great. And it means you have to put your ego aside again, like you were speaking earlier, to take on board the feedback, right?
Right.
Mm. Speaking to the point of the changes, and you mentioned earlier that we can see some of the changes that might be coming down the track. So if you play that scenario out further and say, well, people have been quite effective working from home now. Some of the big companies, particularly the big tech companies, have already offered their employees the option of continuing to work from home for the rest of the year, regardless of what happens with COVID. And some have even said, well, we'll have this as an option permanently. You can work from home if you prefer. So what does that bring with it by way of consequences? So you mentioned the example of a company saying, do we need 8 floors or can we live with 3? So that's going to have an impact on the property market, right?
Right.
And
Right. Exactly.
what does that mean, and what possibilities does that open up? So there's a whole lot of things that you can be thinking about in terms of what's coming down the future.
Absolutely. The footprint's going to look very different
Mm.
in probably about another year or so. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, next question is, do you have a favorite resource that you use most often?
The internet.
Mm.
I'm constantly scouring the internet. I've actually created a spreadsheet of articles, books, YouTube videos, all related to improvisation,
Mm.
and it from a business perspective, primarily. I I I got my books. I gotta quit buying them because I'll find or create more time.
Yeah.
I always see something. I'll pick up a book. I may get halfway through, but I learned something,
Mm.
and I just keep tucking that stuff away. So I'm voracious. I'm not going to go that far, but I'm always scouring, always looking. I get a newsletter from somebody. I read the newsletter. I reference a book. Let me go take a peek at it.
Mm.
And I think I'm keeping Amazon liquid cash wise. But
Yeah. Yeah. You got to love it, don't you? You've got access to so much information, and I mean, unfortunately, some people. We talked earlier about listening to experts. Some people kind of disregard the expert part and take on board information that is easy for people to put out there, but it's not really very good. But on the other hand, if you're a little bit discerning, there's so much valuable stuff there that's so easy to access.
yeah, according to Wikipedia, I'm 35 and 6'5". That is wrong.
Yeah.
I only go to those reputable sources that have been sourced
Mm.
for my information. I'm pretty sure that if I read something out of Forbes, I'm pretty comfortable with that. The Wall Street Journal, Harvard Business Review, I'm pretty
Yeah.
comfortable with that type of information. I know it's been vetted.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, and I love the. I mean, there's so many videos you can go to where people unbox equipment and so on. So it saves you going into the store and begging the um, begging the salesperson to actually show it to you, and then deciding, no, that's actually not what I want. That's not what I need. You can watch it on the internet anonymously, and yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I
Mm.
spend a lot of time on YouTube and in my business and helping to craft my stage presence. I watch a lot of TEDx and
Mm.
TED Talks, and at times I'll just even turn the sound off and just
Yeah.
watch how their the body language is
Mm.
on stage, and it's I don't know. I stay pretty busy.
Yeah, yeah.
But
That's one of the tips my business coach gives me, to watch the TEDx talks of good speakers and turn the sound off. Just watch what they're doing. Watch the body language and how does that What can you learn from that?
A ton. It's
Mm.
find some of these speeches. I was studying Bill Clinton. I was watching Bill's videos, how he spoke and his cadence, and he did a really, really, really good job. But he had that finger thing working there, and then he turned it to the remote control there for a while. But I try to go watch some of these great speakers of our time, and how they command an audience. And it's like I'm not trying to be them.
Mm.
But I'm watching them to hopefully hone that in at some point into my craft.
Yeah, great. Well, there's lots of great advice there. I mean, certainly it's learning from other people and learning from outside sources, I think, is the message that's coming through from all three questions. Yeah. So, what's the best way to keep a client on track?
Oh, daily communication almost, it seems like. Being available when they need you the most, uh, letting them know that all you got to do is give me a call. I'm there. Having empathy for them because you know they're going to get off track, and really having having built up that level of respect and trust that you have for each other, they will come to you if they trust you. They will come to you if they know that you're being honest with them. I hired a coach once, and I said, I don't like feedback sugary. Don't give me sugar.
Hmm.
Right between the eyes. And she goes, "Are you serious?" I said, That's the only way I learn best. Give it to me between the eyes. Don't sugarcoat it. I'm asking for this feedback." So when she gave it to me right between the eyes, when we were done, I just said, "Thank you."
Hmm.
And her response was, "You're weird." She goes, "People get so defensive." I said, "I asked for the feedback.
Hmm.
So I'm not going to get defensive. I might not take any of it, but I've
Hmm.
asked for it." Now, if you give me unsolicited feedback, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
hope
And feedback's a gift, really, isn't it? Particularly if you're asking for it and you get the feedback that might be helpful, might be something that's worth you considering.
right. And you can give that type of feedback to your client if you've got that rapport with them. And you
Hmm.
know, there's times you it will kind of dig in your heels and they'll dig in your heels, but if you keep the conversation going with the yes and get rid of the buts and the no's, you'll come to a solution quicker and with less emotion, negative emotion, than you would with going, "That's stupid. That's crazy. We can't do that."
Yeah.
It's keeping that positive attitude that there's a solution out there.
Yeah, and working together and, yeah, empathy, I think you said it there again, which is really important, having empathy for the other person.
Right. Exactly.
Mm.
And I apologize for the poor Clinton. Sometimes Bill just shows up and
Mm. Wasn't bad, actually. Yeah. Alright, what's the number one thing you think anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
don't be like everybody else. I've had times like Pete. What well, one, I've always known I've been different. And you know what? Tell me I can't do something.
Hmm.
I was told I'll never be an accountant. Well, okay, I should have listened to that one.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but outside of that, you know what? I I put it to you this way. Yeah, we need to be creative. We need to be different. And you know, I working in corporate America, I see a lot of people wear. I hope you're not wearing these right now, but I see a lot of people wearing khakis.
Hmm.
And I started thinking, did Springsteen ever wear khakis? Did Van Gogh wear khakis? Did some of the great inventors of our time show up in a pair of khakis and a blue polo? Probably not. But then everybody looks the same.
Hmm.
And when you try to stand out to some degree, you get kind of stomped on a little bit. I was in public accounting and my wife was in retail and she bought me this really nice suit. It was black. And this is back in the 90s. And I came into work when someone said, "You going to a funeral?" I went, "No." "Then why are you wearing black?" I said, "Because it's kind of a little bit fashion forward. It looks stupid. Go put on a blue blazer." I said, "No, I'm wearing this." So you have to stand out from even in your marketing. You got to stand out from
Mm.
everybody else, and that takes a bit of being vulnerable. Then there's that follow that fear aspect.
Yeah.
Uh, but you know what? There's way too many people who think they know your business better than you do,
Mm.
but they're not even in your business. They might be in the same genre of it or whatever, but you know, just go with what you believe is right. Accept failure, but don't look at it from a negative because we can only get better from our failures. And when we don't make mistakes, then we're taking things
Mm.
way too conservatively.
Mm.
And if my dad was alive right now, he'd probably shoot me. He was very much the opposite.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I guess it's sort of our education system, certainly what I went through was very much around don't make mistakes, get it right. Yeah.
Uh, my son, I'm trying to teach him how to fail, and that failure
Mm.
is okay. And he's learning more than I probably ever did at his age about failure
Mm.
and about taking risks, about taking chances. And then when you fail, okay, what went wrong? Now what are we going to do next? And not lose my mind over it.
Mm. Yeah, not beat yourself up.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, lots of great advice there going through the tips. So thanks for getting us through the buzz round. And thanks. This has been really great, Peter. Now, where can people find out more about you and find out about your books, listen to the podcast, and maybe even reach out and say thank you for what you've shared with us today?
Oh, that's great. They can find me on the internet. It's www.petermargaritis, and my last name is spelled Margaritis. It's pronounced like a cocktail, but it's spelled like an inflammation.
Yeah.
It should be Margaritis, which is too close to hepatitis, gingivitis, and laryngitis. So that's how they can find me. Peter at petermargaritas.com. My email is peter at petermargaritas.com. That's the best place. Website and email. Books
All
are
right.
both books are on Amazon, and the Change Your Mindset podcast on Apple Podcasts and most podcast platforms out there, I believe.
Yep. Yep. Well, I found it through Listen Notes when I went looking for it there as well. So it'll be in your favorite app.
Yes,
Mm.
absolutely. And I
All
want
right.
to thank you for inviting me. I've once again, I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. You're a great host. Love the conversation, and I'm going to have to buy something for Gleb for introducing us.
Great. Yeah. Well, you do that. Yeah. All right. Well, is there a piece of parting advice you'd like to leave our listener today, Peter?
I said it already once in the interview. Improvise the scene that you're in, not the one you want to be in.
Mm.
Which means focus on the things that you have control over. Don't focus on things you don't have control, and make the best out of each day.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I was having a conversation yesterday with one of my clients who we do a podcast together around control, the illusion of control. And it was very much around, there's a whole lot of stuff going on that you have no control over, and accept that and don't beat yourself up over it. But your response and the things that you can control are what you should be focused on. So same message.
Absolutely.
Hmm. All right. Well, finally, Peter, who would you like me to chat with on a future Innova Buzz podcast, and why?
Oh, wow. Uh, okay. Jay Sukhov, who's my improv coach out of Los Angeles, California. He's on faculty at Second City, Hollywood. He he's during this time where there's no live classes. He has innovated, and he's on Facebook doing 10 minutes of improv of people around the globe. He's never done this before. I helped him with a beta test on a virtual improv workshop, which absolutely worked. And now I'm putting on an improv workshop every week. The guy is a great creator of content, of ideas, and he brings that different approach to innovation that most people don't have or see or hear about. But he would be an excellent guest.
All right. Well, great. We'll get an introduction to Jay from you and have him on the podcast for a conversation as well. I really look forward to that as well.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks so much for sharing your time and your insights with us today so generously, Peter. I've really enjoyed this, and I've learned a lot about improv. I think one of the key messages for me is that improv is not about performing or being funny, although there is some of that in there as well. But it's about adapting to any situation you find yourself in and making the best out of that situation, and perhaps reinventing yourself where it might be appropriate. So thanks for sharing all of that with us. I wish you all the best for the future. I didn't ask about the new book. What's book number 3 about?
It's Improv for Business, but it's more aligned as I'm fleshing out. The working title is Improv for the C-Suite. I'm not sure if that's going to be the ending title, but that's what's going on in my head and how I'm trying to take the focus on right it to that audience.
Okay. All right. Well, all the best for that as well. We look forward to finding that on the shelves soon or on Amazon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Peter. I hope you enjoyed that delightfully engaging and insightful conversation with Peter and took something away from his episode. I loved the idea of learning from improv. Fundamentally, it comes back to listening with intent and empathy, and I really like to hear it in their words, quote, or advice too. I'm curious to know what you took away from Peter's episode. Leave a comment below the blog post, which you can find at innovabiz.co/Peter Margaritis. That is PeterMargaritis. All lowercase, all one word, innovabiz.co/Peter Margaritis. You'll also find contact information for getting in touch with Peter there, as well as links to his website, his books, his social media pages, and the other resources we spoke about in today's conversation. Peter suggested we have a conversation with his improv coach, Jay Sukhov, on a future Innova podcast episode. So, Jay, keep an eye on your inbox for an invitation from us to the Innova podcast, courtesy of Peter Margueritas. Finally, I'd like to give a shout out to Peter from Sydney in Australia for his review of the Innova podcast. He says, super informative show. I love this show. Great topics, easy to listen to, and just plain good content. Thank you, Peter. I really appreciate you taking the time to leave us a review, and I'm so glad we're adding value to your listening time. Tune in again to the next episodes of the Innova podcast, where we've got even more fantastic guests lined up, including Sarah McIntyre of Bright Inbound Marketing and Natasha Vorompiova of Systems Rock. Thanks for listening to this episode. Make sure you subscribe to the show to be reminded of new episodes. It's free to subscribe. Leave a review if you like. Even if you don't like me, I'm okay with that. I'm asking you to leave a review because it helps other people find this show. Go to innovabiz.co to join our marketing transformation community and access a free gift my team and I made for you. It's the Marketing Master Mini Class. We want to give you everything you need to transform your marketing into a human-centered, relationship-focused growth engine. Until next time, I'm Jürgen Strauss from Innovabiz. Remember, be awesome and keep innovating.